we were speaking about the idea of Chaloim Yosef, to be able to explain what's going on with בשלום Nafshi, etc. He's going into the Chaloim of Yosef. And first thing he said was about Banachnu Ma'almim Alumim, that the idea of making bundles, that's gathering together separate sheaves, separate stalks of wheat, that's like the collecting of the Netzoitzes that fell in Shviras HaKelim the Toyu, and we're collecting them together. But that, we said, is only a level of Bitla Yesh. Then there's a higher level. There's the Vatishtachavenu La'alumasi, that's going to bow down to my bundle, to the Aluma of Yosef, and that was something even higher. That's called the Bitla Metzias, as opposed to the Bitla Yesh of the Ma'almim Alumim. And to be able to explain that, he goes into the idea of Ela told us Yaakov Yosef, that Yosef was higher than all the Shvatim because, first of all, he was a continuation of Yaakov. So it's like Yaakov was higher than all the Shvatim, so too Yosef was higher than all the Shvatim. And then he said in the brackets that even more so, in a certain way, Yosef was even higher than Yaakov, and because of that, he was held accountable when he used natural means to be able to help himself out by speaking to the Sarah Mashkin, whereas Yaakov was able to use natural means because he wasn't on the level of Yosef. So now the Rebbe is going to continue back to the idea that he also mentioned this pasuk earlier, line 18. This is what it says, that and referring to Yosef's level, that my aluma, my bundle of wheat, stood up and also was standing fast. And the expression of Kabbalah, the main location, the main place where Yosef was located in was in the world of Atzilus. That's what it means. Kama v'gam nitzava. It rose up to the highest, most level, all the way to the world of Atzilus. And this actually expressed itself in how his avodah was down here in this world. Therefore, the Rebbe says in the brackets, Gam Yosef ba'olam hazeh tachten, also being down here in this low world. Ba'ofen, in such a manner, that he came to his home, back to the house of Potiphar, to do his work, so that could be still that he experienced Atzilus in that situation. And also when he was made viceroy, and he was given control over the entire Eretz Mitzrayim, that no person outside of you will raise up their hand or a foot in the whole land of Mitzrayim. Still in all, Yosef HaTzadik was able to go on with his avoiding. He calls it like all of this did not bother him from his avodah to Eibishter, Yaakov, as opposed to Yaakov, that he had to be a shepherd, in the state of someone that kept himself separate and alone, that it was, like it's explained at length in a different place, that he had to be completely removed from the world. That's the idea of a royet sign, completely not engaging with the world. Shenikra oilam ha'achdus, the world of Atzilus, is called the world of unity and oneness. That's going back to right before the brackets over there, and that was the place where Yosef was located. That's the Kama v'gam nitzava. V'habitl shabai hu habitl mitzias, and as we mentioned before, that the vatishtachavenu la'alumasi, the bitl that expresses is a total and complete bitl. Masha'enkin oilum is bri yitzir v'asiyah, as opposed to the worlds of bri yitzir asiyah. Over there, the bitl is a bitl hayesh. Shalzeh Namar, concerning the idea of the different worlds outside of Atzilus, it says, "Nor yoytze me'eden lahashkes sagan." The river goes out of Eden to irrigate the garden, and that is all referring to different levels in Atzilus, Bina or Chachma, etc. But Misham Yipared, from Atzilus. When it goes out of Atzilus, it says, and from there it separates, because it's not the same bittul, it's not the bittul of Atzilus. So what do we find? We bring this back to the dream of Yosef. Even when the avodah of Yosef, or the avodah of a person that's following Yosef, is in the ultimate perfection, meaning they're in the field, they're in the world, then they're gathering up the sparks, they're making the bundles, they're putting it back together. So it's only a bittul hayesh, like we said before. It's overcoming the natural state of separation that is there in the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, that we said that Misham Yiparid, from there, from Atzilus, it goes out into beyond, it becomes separated, so we are reconnecting it. But Yosef Yosef al Shtar Shvatim. Therefore, there has to be the influence and effect of Yosef on the other Shvatim. That's what we're saying, Noye Katzayin Yosef. That just like Yosef led them, what is the following stage, the stage after the binding the sheaves, that your bundles, your sheaves of wheat, encircled the sheaf of Yosef, and they bow down to my bundle. What does that mean? He says in line 10, the bundles of wheat of all the Shvatim, Betelim la'alumas Yosef, are nullified to the bundle of Yosef, meaning la'avodas Yosef. They were nullifying themselves, they were being mevatel themselves to the higher type of avodah that Yosef represents. And by being mevatel themselves to the higher avodah that Yosef represents, through that, the Shvatim also got the bittul of Yosef. It's like the advantage and quality of bittul mitzias over a bittul hayesh. Like it's explained at length in many places about the bittul mitzias over bittul hayesh. Because it's Chaim also in those places from the Rebbe Rashab, it speaks about the advantage of bittul mitzias over bittul hayesh. So this was all the first dream of Yosef, that we have to explain the Pisarin Lataiva, that the whole Avodah is to interpret it in good, meaning to find the ruchnis and spirituality of that dream. Now we're going to speak about the other dream of Yosef. Oizayin, line 16. In addition to this, there's also the idea of the second dream. Behold, the sun and the moon, etc., are bowing down to me. And the idea behind this is like the one whose geula it is. In other words, the Alter Rebbe explains in these Mamarim that bowing down encompasses two levels. One thing is the level of bittul. That's what Ishtachava is about. One person is showing his bittul to another person, for example, or a Yid is showing his bittul to the Eibishter by bowing down to the Eibishter. But there's another component of bowing down. Vahashniya, and the second thing, hu inyan hamshocha. It shows also on drawing down. Shemarkin roishay. Part of Ishtachava is he's bending his head over. Umamshichai lamata, and he draws it down below. So what does this mean over here? The idea of the bowing of Yaakov, because it says the sun and the moon and the stars are bowing down to me. Not like in the first dream where it was only talking about the bundles of wheat of all the Shvatim. It doesn't hint at anything about Yaakov. Here in the second dream, where it includes also the sun and the moon, and the sun in this case refers to Yaakov Avinu, so it means that Yaakov also bowed down. What's the idea of bowing down in Yaakov? it wasn't about bittul of Yaakov to Yosef, but rather it was the second point. Hayarak inyan hamshacha b'vad. It is only the idea of Yaakov's bowing down, the son bowing down, is about Yaakov drawing down and being mamshech alone. It's not about bittul to Yosef. What does that represent? The bowing of Yaakov to Yosef. It indicates that in Yosef is drawn down from the avodah of Yaakov. Shehu inyan naila Yosef minyan ela told us Yosef. That drawing down, that Yaakov was bowing down, the son was bowing down the dream, is a higher idea than this is the offspring of Yaakov, which is Yosef. We said earlier in the Maimer that Ela told us Yaakov Yosef means Yosef was a continuation of Yaakov. Everything that happened to Yaakov happened to Yosef. But that was prior to the dream. By the dream, you had Yaakov bowing down. So that means that there was more to it than what was there earlier in Ela told us Yaakov Yosef. Like it's explained at length in the Mamorim how that was a further stage of Hamshacha, a greater Hamshacha than Ela told us Yaakov Yosef. That's also where it says, the Aviv Shamar Sadavar, when Yosef related the dreams to Yaakov, so Yaakov guarded it. Rashi explains, in other words, he was waiting to see when it would happen. Chassidus has also a meaning to which Aviv Shamar Sadavar. It's a very interesting type of expression. Shamar, he guarded it. Rabbi Magid, like the Mizrich Magid explains, Shamachshava Shoimer Es Hadibur. Thought, which is also over here identified with intellect, is the one that guards the speech. So my intellect ensures that I speak correctly and appropriately. Through that, we have the idea that Chassidus often brings down from Kabbalah, the Lashon, that through Chachma, everything becomes refined, because Chachma delineates and decides that this is good and this is bad, and that causes the separation of the good from the bad. He brings in the commentary on the side, it's similar to like salt that extracts the blood from the meat, or you separate the cream from the milk and make from the milk into cheese. These are different things. Like Chochmah refines and separates the good from the bad. There's also a lashon in Kabbalah that with thought they become refined, which this refinement is, again, the thought that we're talking about over here is Chochmah, which is Birur Sheni, which I think we referred to earlier in this Maimer, that there's a Birur Rishon, there's a first Birur, and then there's a second Birur. The first time something is misbarer, is in a very rough type of Birur, just getting off the open and explicit dirt and blockages, and the second time it's about a more finer, subtler type of refinement. So that is what is accomplished through Yaakov. Yaakov brings down this higher birur and level into Yosef. Top of page Yud Gimel now, Oisches, while Pisa move on, according to this understood, Shaidei Chaloim is the Yosef, through the dreams of Yosef. Beginning from the dream of we were bundling bundles of wheat, and they bowed down to my bundle until the dream of the sun, etc. were bowing down to me. This causes that even the dream of the time of Golus that we mentioned, Hayinu Kecholmim, then that has a very high root and needs to be interpreted for good, because every dream follows its interpretation. So Yosef, who is the interpreter of dreams, gives us the capability to overcome the dream of Golus and to interpret it and bring the good out of it. He says, both concerning the exile of Nefesh in the body and the animal soul, like we mentioned earlier. That's the initial exile, the Yerida, that the Neshama comes down into the body and the Nefesh Bahamis. That it's fulfilled the purpose for which the Neshama descended down here, which is to repair the body in the Nefesh Bahamis. That is through these interpretations of Yosef's dream for good. That is going back to what we spoke about at the beginning of the Maimer, בשlom nafshi, that a person that follows in the three things that he spoke about, Tefillah b'tzibur, Torah, Gemilas Hasadim. So it's as if he redeems me and my children from amongst the nations. So there's the literal nations; those are human beings that are we are under their control, and then there is the subtle form of umais. What is the subtle form of umais? It's referring to the body and the animal soul. It's explained in the Mambarim by the title Havayli Be'Oizroi, Umuva B'Kitzur B'Drushi Parts Vayeshev, and it's brought down in short in the Mambarim and Parts Vayeshev of that we're talking about now in the Mambarim Adal Tereb and Parts Vayeshev. So that is the P'da'ani L'Mreina Umes, that we're being redeemed from the Nefesh Bahamis and the Guf. And in a further way, there's another type of interpretation of the dream, the redemption of Golus in its literal sense. And both according to the time of Golus in the simple sense, the Ani Chulu, he redeemed me, etc., from amongst the nations, in the literal sense. Oistes. According to what was explained previously, the general idea of avoid is to refine those matters that are in the way of separation, and to influence them, that they are joined together. That's the idea of the ma'al malumim, that the nitzoitzes that are scattered all over have to be joined together. And we said that initially the first step is we have to mimavat liyesh, heip kapirud, which is the opposite of separation. We take them all together, no separation, we make them into a bundle. And afterwards, poil and bidlur mitzias, the bowing down, that's bidlur mitzias. So the bundling is the bidlur yesh, and the bowing down of the bundles is bidlur mitzias. So now Yuvan Gama Kesher Vashaycha shall close avoiding binah shalom. Now will be understood the connection and the association of this general avoid of the time of Golus with the idea of Shalom that we're saying right away. The main part of Pasuk is part of Shalom Nafshi. Then everything else follows. But the main part is the idea of Shalom. Why is Shalom, peace, the primary thing? The idea of peace applies when there are two separate matters. Even more so in Yonim Hofchim, when there are two opposite things. There's a war between them. Like the pasuk says, Mikravli, that Padu Shalom Nafshi, he redeemed in peace my soul from those that battled me. Then, when there's two opposites or even opposing things, warring factions, it's possible to say you're making peace and a joining and a unity amongst them. Similar to what it says, of the one who makes peace and is exalted in high levels. What does that mean? He makes peace in the exalted and high levels. The since there's Michal, who is the minister of snow and water, Gavriel is the minister in charge of fire. And therefore that means that these two malachim doing their avodah, that fire and water represents, Yira and Ava, there is a dispute. They can't join together. Therefore, one must make peace amongst them. What does this mean in our service of Hashem? Is inyan the la'im yamatz, that one nation over another nation will overcome and overpower. This means lizgaber al kol ha'inyanim akshurim im ha'la'im hasheni, to overcome all those matters that are connected with the other la'im, with the other nation, with the other side, with the sidra achra. V'lifal bahem, and to affect in everything in the la'im hasheni, in the other nation, and the other power, ha'inyan de ma'al ma'alumim, the idea of bundling the sheaves together. How does that happen? How do you transform the other side? So this has to be, first of all, preparation. So that's what he says in the brackets. After the preparation of the idea of turning away from bad, top of page Yudalid, to nullify all those things that are obstacles. So once one removes everything having to do with klippa, once turns away from bad, he's mekayim the mitzvahs loisa, then he can incorporate and elevate all those things from the world into kedusha. This incorporating and elevating all the things from world into kedusha, that's the idea that he's binding knots, ma'asrin asadim, like the Lashon HaTargum is. Va'ad inyan, the tlas kishrin is kashin davada. We're not just talking about the binding of the sparks that are scattered, but we're talking about even a higher level of binding that's brought down in Chassidus, the three bonds and knots that are connected one with each other. Yisrael, Bayrais, Yisrael are connected to Torah, Bayrais, and the Torah connected to Hashem. And they're not just about those three entities, but rather that through the Torah, Yidden are connecting the entire world with Kudsha B'richu. So that's the Ma'al Malum B'toich HaSoda, taking everything from the field, taking everything from the world, and binding it to Elikus. And the way they bind it is Loirak Ba'ifin Shal Bitla Yesh. Not only in a way of Bitla Yesh, which is just the binding, Elagam Ba'ifin Shal Bitla Metzias, also in a way of Bitla Metzias, which is what happens with the bowing down, as we said earlier. So now we're going to get back again to the pasuk of Pod V'Shalom Mois Yud V'Zeu Pod V'Shalom Goimer. That's where it says he redeemed in peace. Kol Oisik B'Torah Chul. Whoever is involved in Torah, etc. It's as if P'da'ani Liu Levane Beinu Masa'ilom, he redeemed me and my children from amongst the nations of the world. Behind this means Haidei Klolos Avodah B'Kiyam Torah mitzvahs, through the general avodah and fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. We influence and affect the refinement and the fixing up of the body and the animal soul. In such a way that we reveal by every single Yid the land of desire. What does that mean, the land of desire? So he brings the word of the Baal Shem Tov, brought down na Yom Yom, Keteris of Baal Shem Tov, al pasuk, like the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov on the pasuk, Yitziu atem eretz chayfetz, that you will be a land of desire. Shekol eretz, chol echad misrael eretz chayfetz. Every single Yid is a desirous land. Meaning, what's it mean, desirous land? Is something special. What's the specialness? V'yesh by kol davar yakar. It has every precious thing. Kol hoin yakar, every precious wealth. All you need to do is dig until you reveal it. So then the service to Hashem becomes in such a way that you will surely help and assist the donkey, meaning the Nefesh Bahamis. You won't disregard the Nefesh Bahamis, but you will elevate the Nefesh Bahamis, Yachid Ma'guf Nefesh Bahamis, along with the body and the animal soul, out of joy and gladness of heart. Like to explain in the Reins of the Rizal how great Simcha is, like the Ram writes at the end of the laws of Lulav, that joy is a great avodah movement. The great and the powerful avodah means it's not just a difficult avodah and so on, but it's also a great avodah in its quality and importance. Through this becomes also, you will redeem me in the literal sense. Instead of being like dreamers in the time of exile, Nasa Gula Mitzvah Shleim becomes a true and complete redemption of Binyan Beis Hamikdash and the building of the Beis Hamikdash. V'sham Nasl F'necha Chulu K'mitzvah Tznecha, and over there we'll perform before you like the mitzvahs of your will. Koil Gam Mitzvah Adlokas Neiris, including also the mitzvah of the kindling of the Neiris. Concerning this is the idea that says these candles are never to cease. Their foundation. Where does it come from? And what's the cause for the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukah candles? Is the candles that were in the Beis Hamikdash, Valderech Zeh Beis Hamikdash Shlishi, and similar vein will be in the third Beis Hamikdash. Yibana Bakar Mamish will be rebuilt soon. Mamish Adi Melch Beis David Shahig B'Torah David through a king of Beis David that is involved in Torah like David his father. Yaakov Kol Yisrael Leilach V'Dark L'Chazak Bitka. He will coerce all the Yidden to go on its way and to strengthen it. He will fight the wars of Hashem and he will be victorious. He will build the Beis Mikdash in its place. And afterwards he will collect the scattered Yidden. It's similar to the idea of bringing together the bundles. Measure for measure, but many times more than what we accomplish when we put together the bundles. Hashem accomplishes in gathering together all the Yidden until it becomes the idea that the legs of the Talmudoi will cease, like we say about how late we can light Hanukkah candles. Like explained in all these Mamorim, Talmudoi is from the word rebellious. In the Lois of Avad Shem Talmudoi Atzmam column, not only do the Talmudoi themselves, the rebelliousness itself becomes cease. El Kali Gam Ragla Talmudoi, even the legs of the Talmudoi cease. By the heels of Mashiach becomes nullified. The heels of Klippa, Vanasa, in the Voya, Ekev Tishmon becomes instead that the heel will listen. Hashem will guard and observe the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your forefathers, almost in the land of the 7 nations. Afterwards, in a way that Hashem will broaden your boundaries, also including those 3 lands, because of Mamish, soon Mamish will be in the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu.